Hello, friends. I ran into a little difficulty, and I'm going to have to do the first 10 minutes or so, 11 minutes of number 92 over again. I had a delay on the microphone and weird sounds, so let's begin again, and I'll go up to the point where I had reached, and then this will be spliced together. So this is the beginning of 92, and DK says, I have given you so much information anent initiation and the rays and centers in my many books that there is no need for me to repeat it here. Well, indeed, if we were to correlate it, we would find a vast project ahead of us. There is, however, a great need for you to collect and tabulate the scattered information so that you can register it as a whole, although we might say that this is this comes with a warning not to make such tabulations available to those who are merely curious and who may misuse the information. Many of those who read the instructions and who study the books I have written are in process of preparation for one or other of the initiations. The entire theme should therefore be of major interest to you, vital interest really. And we're talking about the first three initiations particularly. And I've said here, we have to know about the centers, the rays, and the astrology, which correlates with these centers and rays. So this is the technical side of our work, and some approximation is needed. We have to know at least tentatively which initiation may lie ahead of us, and then discover all we possibly can about it. And its prerequisites, not that we can necessarily fulfill them all immediately, but at least to know with the concrete mind what lies ahead. And we will endeavor to make the practical application of the imparted information. It is difficult to make application of this, but we have to concentrate upon it. So, he faces us with kind of an ultimatum here. Either what I say to you, what I give to you is true, or it is not. If true, it is vital to your future progress, and you should aim at achieving a measure of real understanding. But how will we know? We have to try it out before we know whether it is true or not. So, it takes work and concentration on our part, obviously. The nice thing about the ageless wisdom is, we get to see for ourselves. It's not just a question of belief, although a type of healthy belief is necessary to get us moving in the right direction, but then we can substantiate the truth of the Master's words as we go along. You have been taught that the activity or inactivity of the centers conditions the personalities, especially, I suppose, the centers within the torso and also the centers within the head. Working through the endocrine system, this information largely from esoteric healing. That's where we find the connection between the centers, the nervous system, the endocrine glands, etc. The energies which the centers channel, let's call that coming from above, let's call that transmission, and the forces which they generate, let's call that coming from within, let's call that emission. So we have transmission and emission. Can be controlled and directed by the soul, by the spiritual man, and the spiritual man is in the beginning the soul, but then eventually the triadally infused soul, and then the monadically, triadically infused soul. This becomes the true spiritual man. It rises in its significance as we go through the higher initiations. That is, what is the spiritual man? You have likewise been told that the energy of the sacral center, the center most implicated and active at the time of the first initiation, has to be transmuted and raised to the throat center, thereby transforming the physical creative act, procreation, into the creative process of producing the good, the beautiful, and the true. So from the throat center must emerge the good, the beautiful, and the BTF, right? And the true. Usually the good associated with ray 1, the beautiful with ray 2 or 4, and the true with ray 3 or 5. But these are all coming through the throat center once it becomes a truly creative center, and once it begins to take the place of excessive procreation. We may remember that it is the task of those who are less evolved, he tells us in a treatise on cosmic fire, to produce vehicles for their own reincarnating group. So this is the ABC of your fundamental knowledge, the transmutation of sex, with which humanity at present is having such tremendous problems, such that the hierarchy doesn't even know where the problem will end, he tells us. In that transmutative process, men have greatly erred and have approached the subject from two angles. Well, you know, planetary logoi can err, great initiates can err, and certainly humanity, who has not followed the good law or the rules laid down in the early days, has fallen into great error and retardation and sin and all kinds of unnecessary states that have added to the suffering, to their suffering. Indeed, we are on a planet of purifying pain and releasing sorrow, but we don't need to have taken it, I think, as far as we have. So what are the two angles that human error has followed? And the first is that we have sought to stamp out natural desire and have endeavored to emphasize and enforce celibacy. Maybe for some at some times it may be useful. For some at some times it may be useful, but not in general, and often as a compensation for a previous license. Thus, they have frequently warped the nature and subjected the natural man, the elemental man, the personal man, to rules and regulations which were not of divine intent. A warping is excessive, unnatural growth of a part of a structure and a diminution of another. DK tells us that there's been an irrational war of Christianity, a Scorpionic religion, against sex, and maybe this is taken somewhat from Platonism or from the idea that greater progress can be made through the transmutation of the sex impulse. But I think the entire transformation or transmutation of that impulse is only for the very few, and they have to really know what they are doing so their nature does not become warped. Even the masters marry, we are told, and have children, some of them. So that demonstrates the idea that in order to be spiritual, one does not necessarily have to suppress the sex impulse, but the wise use of it, of course, and especially in a creative way, is needed. Then, on the other hand, they have tried at the other extreme to exhaust normal sexual desire by promiscuity, license, and perversions. Perversions do exist as much as we tend in our very humanistic and tolerant days to say, well, it's just a person's choice, but there are laws, and there are divine laws, and there are sins against the Holy Spirit, and we have to really pay attention to these. So the whole idea is to wear the center out so it doesn't cause you any more trouble. But obviously this doesn't work and depletes the entire system so that there is not sufficient energy left for the transmutation and regeneration and elevation into higher contacts. So they damage themselves in doing this, and they lay of trouble for many incarnations. You know, you can take the use of centers too far and create a great imbalance, and you can create structural trouble for yourself. So you kind of wonder, why not take the noble middle path the Buddha suggested? Try to remember whether the Prince Siddhartha or Gautama had children. I don't remember, but he certainly was naturally married coming under Taurus. But then, you know, was he the Buddha per se? I think he was the vehicle for the Buddha, just the way Jesus was the vehicle for the Christ. That's been my assumption, because, you know, when you're already the head of the hierarchy for approximately 2,500 years, you don't go off looking in the forest for the noble middle way. You are head of the hierarchy. So that's who the real Buddha was. But he needed I think, becoming fourth degree initiate like Gautama, or sometimes called Siddhartha, in order to establish a point of contact, you know. So when we study, I think we're going to study those two together, the Christ and the Master Jesus, or the initiate Jesus at the time, and the true Buddha and the initiate Gautama, who made important discoveries in the forest and probably opened himself up to the Buddha using his vehicle in which to take a kind of contact with the cosmic mental plane, a sixth initiation. Now, this probably takes me as far as I got before, when I realized there was going to be real trouble because of the way this headphone was registering. I think I've already done this. I might repeat it a little bit. True transmutation is in reality the achieving of a correct sense of proportion. It's so Libran in nature, and Uranus is the esoteric ruler. Uranus, the planet of transmutation, the esoteric ruler of Libra. And it has true transmutation, particularly for the race of men at this time, has relation to the sacral center and the energies which bring it into activity. So we really need to achieve a balance here, and it is not yet the case by any means. As a matter of fact, coming into the age of Aquarius via Venus for most human beings is creating a problem in relation to the sense of sexual affiliation. And we'd come in under Saturn as disciples, and maybe humanity as a whole is coming in more under Saturn. But Saturn will provide the necessary restraint, but it also could provide suppression. So we need that proper recognition of the place the sex life should play in the daily life, and it has paralleled by the concentration of thought and then the throat center, and that center becomes automatically magnetic, and it attracts the forces of the sacral center coming up the spine to the place of creative building. This is what we must do. At least it is the task of some to do this, not all. But increasingly, intelligent humanity of the Aryan race has to understand the place of that center of intelligence, the throat center, and how the good, the true, the beautiful can be intelligently created. And then we have the normal sex life regulated, not atrophied, and it's relegated to its proper place as one of the usual faculties. We call it a faculty because it is of use. It's not just an instinct. It is an appetite, but also a faculty for a particular purpose. And this is all brought under regulation. So I think that's probably taken things far enough. And there may be a little bit of disjointedness as we switch over into the other part of the video, during which I switched headphones, and that worked out okay. So if you can pardon this little bit of a hiccup, and then I'll be on to the baptism in the Jordan. And I think everything here, I think I've gone on and discussed this in the other video. So I just want to say by force of example, by avoiding all extremes, by dedication of the bodily energies to higher uses. And really, the physical body is not a principle, so they're always centers of higher use. By the acceptance of the law of the land in any given country at any given time, the present disorder should be solved under the seventh ray, and the current use of the sex principle will give way to orderly, regulated, rhythmic living in which we don't have the warping of the nature. Right now, there's a kind of warping of the nature, but it's coming through license and excess, I think, and there's much more of that, I suspect, than there is of the suppression of the sex impulse, except perhaps in the church, and we've had tremendous problems there with the perversions and the homosexuality and so forth, and the misuse by the priests of the younger people coming up through the church. So it's just a terrible situation, and it's coming from unnatural living. All right, that ought to take us as far as we need to go, and let's call this the end of the redone introduction to Raised Initiation Webinar Commentary number 92. Now, if there's a bit of a hiccup coming in here, please excuse that, and we'll do the best we can to correct that. Okay. Thank you, and I'll be on to number 93 before long. Bye for now. Okay, so these are the methods that have been used, and neither one of them is really correct. True transmutation is in reality the achieving of a correct sense of proportion. There's Libra again, in relation to any phase of human life, and for the race of men today, has particular reference to the sacral center and the energies which bring it into activity. Even the masters do not know where the sex problem will end. When a proper recognition of the place of the sex life, recognition of the place the sex life should play in the daily life is paralleled by the concentration of thought anent the throat center, that center becomes automatically magnetic and attracts the forces of the sacral center upward through the spine into the place of creative building. So the throat center must be concentrated upon while the transmutation is occurring. The normal sex life is then regulated and not atrophied, and is relegated to its proper place as one of the usual faculties or appetites with which man is endowed. And notice it is as well a faculty, not just an instinct, but something with which we as human beings are endowed for a needed purpose. Concentrated. Okay. All right. It is brought under control for the lack of directed interest and is subordinated to the law of the land as regards its relation to the opposite pole, either negative and feminine or masculine and positive. So no direct or excessive interest and subjugation to law. Subjugation to law. To the aspirant, it becomes mainly the agent, of course, there's no perfection here. To the aspirant, it becomes, mainly the agent for the creation of the vehicles needed for reincarnating souls, and thus, by force of example, by avoiding of all extremes, by the dedication of the bodily energies to the higher uses, And by the acceptance of the law of the land in any country at any given time, the present disorder and the current misuse of the sex principle give way to orderly living, we might say, under the seventh ray, and to the right use of this major bodily function. So these are the factors which are involved here. Okay. These are the factors. For some example, setting an example, paying attention to the best examples by the avoiding of all extremes, by the dedication of the bodily energies to the higher uses, and we might say that almost every aspect of man should be considered of a higher nature than the dense physical body, which is not a principle. And by the acceptance of the law of the land, which of course in many ways is not accepted and is violated at any given time, the present disorder and the current misuse of the sex principle will give way to orderly living. I think we can expect this to be occurring during the seventh ray coincidence along with the Aquarian energy, or coincidence. The regulated physical life comes about when the personality is sufficiently integrated and coordinated, and the ajna center, the center between the eyebrows, is active and coming under the control of the soul. So we have the ajna center is the director, and integration indicates control. This has an immediate effect, automatically induced, upon the gland associated with this center. So these are the gonads and ovaries. So soul control affects the glands associated with the sex center, the sacral center. It becomes a balanced part of the general endocrine system, and past imbalance is avoided. Notice the Libran association, where balance has to be achieved, but so often in the Libran life, at first balance is not achieved, and there's a wild swinging between opposites. Simultaneously, the head center becomes active as a result of the aspirant's mental perception, meditation, and service, and this brings the allied glands, the pineal, the allied gland, the pineal, into action. All this is the ABC of cultism, but with the pineal in action, the sacral center is regulated. The pineal has a strong regulatory effect on all lesser glands, and it is an indication that the soul energy is taking over. So obviously this is not something that happens overnight, and mental training and the mind directed by the soul, these are all needed, and an example has to be set by those who understand that it is the transmutation of the sacral energy which leads to the kind of creativity and the right use of the third ray which appears before the first initiation. So this is a first initiation process, and we're told that the personality is frequently found upon the third ray when that process is being undergone, along with a seventh ray mind and a seventh ray brain. Unusual combination of energies, but the possibility we see of regulation is also there. What is often omitted from normal consideration is the fact that the increasing activity of these 2 points of light within the head, I suppose we're talking about basically related to what is occurring in the sacral and throat centers, is basically related to what is occurring in the sacral and throat centers. There's always a center in the head that corresponds with one of the major lesser centers. And the transmutative process proceeds, and the energies of the sacral center are gathered up into the throat center, without, however, withdrawing all the energy from the lower center, and thus its normal activity is properly preserved. Imbalances are also possible here. If all the energy is abstracted, the two centers in the head then become correspondingly active. I suppose we're talking about the head correspondences to the sacral and throat centers. Oftentimes, when we speak of two centers within the head, we're talking about the pineal gland and the personality, the pituitary gland, pituitary connected with the personality per se. But we have to remember that the head is the great director and that everything found below is found above. So the head is a kind of macrocosm of all that can be found within the torso. The two centers in the head then become correspondingly active. The negative and positive elements affect each other. They're very interesting. So, and the light in the head shines forth. Now, this is frequently the case in regard to, in relation to the pineal and pituitary, that the light in the head shines forth. But I suppose, the single eye with the preservation of that particular energy, which is often used in sex, there is a greater enlightenment of the mechanism. And I think we see that in the Taurus labor of Hercules, where he drives the bull, sort of the symbol of the instinctual nature, to the island of the one-eyed men, the Cyclopses, and how the harnessing of the instinctual nature leads to the illumination of the personality and of the mind under the single eye. And a unity is revealed, not necessarily only a duality. A line of light, the light in the head shines forth. A line of light permitting free interplay is established between the ajna center and the head center. Yes, this is something that's going on. And therefore between the pituitary body and the pineal gland. This is going to lead to illumination. But we cannot forget what is also hinted at here, that the highest correspondence of the throat center and of the sacral center are interactive within the head. That's what seems to be the case. And I don't. Of course, it makes sense. But it's not, frequently discussed. So the aspirant's mental perception brings the allied gland, the pineal gland, into action. The 2 points of light is basically related to what is occurring in the sacral and throat centers. So basically what he's saying is that the interaction of the pineal gland and the pituitary have a correspondence to the interaction of the throat center and the sacral center. So he's dealing actually with 4 centers here, and he's dealing with the well-known interaction of pineal and pituitary, but also talking about the presence in the head of the higher correspondences to the throat and sacral centers. When the line of light is present and there is an unobstructed relation between the two centers and the two glands, then the first initiation becomes possible. So this is the technical requirement. Here we have the technical, I suppose that's technique, a TECH. Let's get that one in there. TCHL. Okay. There we have the technical requirement of which allows the first initiation to occur. The line of light is present and there is an unobstructed relation between the two centers and the two glands, and obviously since the throat center and sacral center are both involved with this first initiation, there's some kind of interactive parallel process going on in the head that makes the first initiation possible, not only pineal and pituitary, but the higher throat center and the higher sacral center. When this takes place, it must not be inferred that the task of transmutation going on between the higher and lower and higher centers and the relationship between the two head centers is fully and finally completed and established. So this is not the completion of the, well, let's just say completion of the intended process, but just the beginning. The line of light is still tenuous and unstable, but it is in existence, and we're dealing with an initiation of the threshold, so we don't need perfection. Perfection is not needed when dealing with an initiation of the threshold. So, okay, so let's call this initiation of the threshold. Okay, right. It is the energy let loose at the first initiation and distributed into the sacral and throat centers via the slowly awakening head center, which brings the transmutation process to a successful conclusion and stabilizes the relationship within the head, let's just say, eventually, as the following initiations are pursued. So there is a head center influence on the sacral center and the throat center within the torso and also within the head. These are technicalities, and they are of interest. They'll be of particular interest when we have the kind of spiritual physiology that will come to be developed as the etheric physical interaction is better understood. This process may take several lives of steadily intensifying effort on the part of the initiate disciple. Here we have initiate disciple, meaning even an initiate of the first degree. Interesting. Oftentimes the term initiate disciple is used for those who have taken the third degree, a true initiate and obviously still a disciple. So there is, at least for me, an emphasis of some information that I had not, in my own mind, emphasized sufficiently. Maybe the case is so for you, but, whatever is going on in the torso is also in a higher correspondence going on within the head. And, not, let's just say the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, and the head center and the ajna center are not found within the torso, they are only within the head, but there are other 7 centers, and maybe with the alto major center making 10, sometimes you see a 7 plus a 2. You see that in the Pleiades. There's a 7 of the 7 sisters and a 2 with the parents of the Pleiades, and wherever there's a 7, there's also a 10. So, the 3 major centers in the head are the head center, the ajna center, and the alto major center, and then 7 below. But how we count these is subject to interpretation. So anyway, it's not immediate that there is this stabilization of the interplay between the pineal and pituitary glands, and between the throat center in the head and the sacral center in the head, and between the throat center in the torso and the sacral center in the torso. All of that has to be built up over time. Thus, the work of magical reformation starts. We have to remember, let's see here, remember the relationship between the 7th ray and the first initiation, and the sacral center, and the throat center, because there does come a time when the throat center itself is ruled by the 7th ray, and presumably by Uranus then, and it is around the time of the, during the initiatory process. Even at the first initiation, some of that rulership of the 7th ray comes in, because the mind will be found on the 7th ray when the first initiation is being taken, and the mind has that close relationship to the throat center. Thus, the work of magical reformation starts as we approach the first initiation, and it is here that the influence of the 7th ray, God, I seem to be anticipating these things, which governs the first initiation, enters in. Maybe I remember from reading it before, but my eyes did not light upon that subsequent sentence. So it seems logical. One of the functions of this ray is to bring together soul and body, the higher and the lower, life and form, spirit and matter. We're told the highest and lowest meet, or, the higher and the lower meet. Right. So this is the creative task confronting the disciple who's engaged in lifting the energies of the sacral center to the throat center. And remember, again, that there must be concentration on the throat center during this process, and higher forms of creative enterprise at work, and the establishing of right relation between the personality and the soul. So personality and soul, we have, for personality and soul, we have head center and ajna center, and for the normal energy exchange of the first initiation, we have throat center and sacral center. Just as the antakarana has to be constructed and established as a bridge of light between the spiritual triad and the soul-infused personality, or the soul-infusing personality, because, it's not complete. When the antakarana is being constructed, we still do not have a completely soul-infused personality, but it is a soul-infusing personality. So a similar bridge or correspondence is established between the soul and personality. We remember that the triangular nature of the antakarana, we will see that triangular, and remember, if we were to look here, we would see there's the triangle. Now, this is not the picture of the egoic lotus that I prefer. My wife, too, have made one that I think is more accurate in certain respects, and certainly certain coloristic respects, as red is not really found, according to the Tibetan, in the egoic lotus, unless we have the general coloring of red in first ray souls. But in the petals, red is not found. It's a rose color, which we tend to find. But here is the triangular relationship of the antakarana. So, in addition to this aspect of the antakarana, the connection between the mental unit and the egoic lotus becomes stronger and stronger, and I assume such is the case between the center of the egoic lotus and the monastic permanent atom. I sometimes call that the philosophical connection. So a similar bridge of correspondence is established between soul and personality. See that mental unit is sort of the center of the personality, and then the soul, it reaches into the egoic lotus, which is the vehicle of the soul. And in connection with the mechanism of the disciple, between the two head centers and the two glands within the head. So we have a number of parallel connections occurring at the time of the first initiation. Okay. When the line of light has Okay, so let's see what we have here. When the line of light has related the higher spiritual aspects and the lower, and when the sacral center and the throat center are in true related alignment, the initiate disciple becomes a creative worker under the divine plan and a magical exponent of the divine building work. So what we might say here is we are on the way to developing let's get that in EVG. Sorry for these little pauses, but they help later, and there is apparently a later. On their way to developing skill in white magic. He is then a constructive force, wielding energy consciously on the physical plane. A white magician is always a constructive force. He is always a constructive force, even when using destruction, because sometimes things have to be cleared out of the way in order for new constructions to take the place of old. So he creates forms as expressions of reality. This is the true work of magic, but glamour and illusion are the creation of forms which are not expressions of reality. They are expressions of fantasy and misapprehension, rather expressions of fantasy and misapprehension. So wrong mental understanding and incorrect creation of form, the unwise, non-plan related relationship of the creative imagination to something which is not real. You can see, therefore, that in the creative work, three energies are brought into related activity. So, basically he's dealing here with white magic, the first initiation, and the seventh ray. So the energy concentrated in the ajna center, which is indicative of the personality life. This is this is activated. The energy concentrated in the head center is a result of soul activity. So, soul life stimulates the head center, and the energy of the seventh ray of ceremonial order or magic, making possible true creative activity under the divine plan, and these would be related to the sacral center and throat center, whether in the torso or the higher correspondences in the head center, or in the head, let's just say in the head. So, three energies are involved in the creative work, and I guess you could say we become truly creative when the period of the first initiation is beginning. Okay. There is nothing spectacular to be told anent the first initiation. It's so interesting, the initiate disciple. See, he's using that over and over again, and previously he's used that term to indicate a more advanced type of disciple, a third degree disciple. But note that this term is also used to indicate initiate of the first degree. So the initiate disciple still works in the dimly lit cave of the spiritual birth. There's a little bit of light, right? It's dimly lit. A little light is present. But much more light is necessary as the initiatory process goes on. He has to continue his struggle to reveal divinity, primarily at first on the physical plane, symbolized for us in the word Bethlehem, which means the house of bread. So for the first degree initiate, right, FDI. Okay, let's see if I can get that correct. FDI, and we're going to call this the first degree initiate. And let's do a couple of them. Second degree initiate. I think you can see why I'm doing this. Second degree initiate. Yes, you know what's coming. And the third degree initiate. Maybe I better put third degree initiate. Sorry for this delay. But, no perfection just yet. And FR degree initiate. Fourth degree. Should we go to the fifth? FOUR, fourth degree initiate. And finally, let's stop here. Fifth degree initiate. Fifth degree initiate. Okay. So house of bread. For the first degree initiate, work is upon the physical plane, primarily. He has to learn the dual function of lifting up the lower energies into the light and at the same time of bringing down the higher energies into bodily expression. Mercury will help here. Mercury is not only involved with the building of the antakarana, but with all exchanges of energy, and thus he becomes a white magician. And notice Notice in the tarot, magician card is associated with Mercury. Okay, at this initiation he sees for the first time, and we might say, and maybe within the causal body, what are the major energies which he must bring into expression, and this vision is summed up for him in the old commentary in the following words. I mean, in the chamber of initiation, we see and understand much more than we remember. Within the physical brain, let's see if we get this, PBR, consciousness. So much is forgotten, and maybe even 2 initiations are undergone without a recollection in the brain consciousness. When the rod of initiation descends and touches the lower part of the spine, lower part. Now, does this necessarily mean the base of the spine center, or is the sacral center in the lower part of the spine? There is a lifting up. When the eyes are opened in the light, that which must be lowered into form is now perceived. The vision is acknowledged, and of course, more intensely in the CHOI. What will that be? Let's just call it let's see if you can guess, right? This is the chamber of initiation. So, much more is seen there. The burden of the future is assumed and seen, and then, of course, often forgotten, but somehow internally guides the man, maybe somewhat unconsciously to him, but he has the sense of what it is right to do, even though he may not have the same type of vision he had in the chamber of initiation. The cave is lighted up and the new man issues forth. Well, in initiation, human and solar, see how we can do this. In IHS, initiation, human and solar, we are told of all the realizations which occur in the chamber of initiation, but which are forgotten subsequently. So let's keep that purple as it is my own thoughts here, and not those of decay. We must keep these discriminatively separate. I don't like to mix my thoughts with those of decay, although I suppose it's inevitable, but I will certainly always give him credit when I'm using one of his thoughts. I don't want people to confuse my own responses to his thoughts with what he has originally said. So the cave is lighted up and the new man issues forth, the new man in Christ, the first degree initiate of initiation. But this is my own stuff. Right. This may be true of all of you who read these words, that this may be true of all of you who read these words is the prayer and the wish of your friend and counselor. Note. And here's what I'll do. I've got to get my little purple bracket going there. Note how, well, that's not That's not good. It will begin here. Note how Master Decay refers to self. Friend. Hierarchy is friend in the truest, friendship in the truest sense of the word. So, your friend and counselor. I guess if we, to our students, could be friends and counselors of a certain degree, it would be a great thing. Would be a great thing for all of us. So look, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to kind of end this, and I'll say that this is the end of Ray's and Initiation Webinar Commentary number 92, done on the 23rd day of July. And I think it's 669 up to 673. Last night I couldn't really have the stamina to go forward here, but he has done a great deal to familiarize us with the meaning of the first initiation, the glands involved, the centers involved, the clarification of the term initiate disciple, or does he sometimes use the word disciple initiate, but the higher term, of course, is initiate, the idea of the of what true creativity is. Well, it's all here, at least enough to stimulate our thought. So these things are going on beneath the scenes, as it were, on the energic level. And there's the whole issue of sex and how it is to be treated, largely for the making possible of the incoming of the reincarnating souls, according to the law of the land, all in balance, some of the sexual energy remaining, not all of it transmuted into the head. Yes, it's all a question of treading the path with balance, and interesting that Libra has a lot to do with that first initiation, with the sex center and with living the balanced life in which all types of energies receive their true proportionate expression. Well, we live in very stressful times, and there's a lot of difficulty around the resolution of unwholesome ways of using this energy. You might say that, humanity, especially coming in now, as it will, under Venus, and under the seventh ray, is a bit sex mad. And the higher type of sexual relationship between soul and personality is not widely understood, but disciples have to contribute to its understanding. How that will be accepted as a fanciful possibility, perhaps, but by example, eventually people will come to understand. Okay, so friends, now I'm going to, I'll go on a little later with another going on into the baptism in the Jordan. Interesting how the Middle East is becoming such a focal area today at the time when the Christ is planning to reappear. Of course, it will, it won't be in the image of the Master Jesus, although he will probably be one of the reappearing initiates, masters. The Christ has his own Maya Virupa, and, who will accept him on that basis? How will he make himself known unto his own? These are all factors coming up for our consideration and for his proper management during the next 2,000 years or so. So let's just say that we have a lot to prepare for. It's an amazing time. So much progress is possible, not only for the individual disciple, but for humanity in general, if rightly handled and in a balanced manner. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get this out to you, number 92, and maybe in a week or so it'll be there for you. I think I don't prepare the final part of it. Brett does that, and he's not available right now, but it's coming. Okay, so we'll see you soon. Many blessings, and on we go.